Philippines is a hotspot for natural hazards. It ranks number 4 in terms of vulnerability to climate change and is one of the top 20 countries with the highest risk for natural disasters.
What is the Building Resiliency Index?
The developers have a lot of hazard assessment tools at their disposal, but they may not be aware of how to mitigate for these hazards. There's also a lack of knowledge of the cost implications and the benefits of mitigating against disasters.
Before we decide to build, to design in a certain place, what we do is we study, we gather data about the elements in that particular place, such as raining precipitation, temperature, sun path, wind direction, wind speed, and also if the place is prone to typhoon, earthquakes, floods, and according to the data we gather, we analyze and we design accordingly. One particular example of knowing where you are going to build, I mean the site or where you are going to build, can be my direct experience of Sendong, the typhoon that hit Cagayan de Oro and Misamis Oriental in 2011. I was there, by the way, and I saw the devastation of the typhoon and above all the damages that the typhoon created to houses and victims. Choosing the right location can really make a big difference.
And in the webinar, we will talk about some of these mitigating measures around 4 hazard categories, such as water, wind, geoseismic, and fire hazards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very new series of Design and Build by the Infrastructure and Construction Focus Group. Now, this series will accompany us throughout 2022, and in fact, it will allow you in a new episode format to watch the content every time you want through our Facebook channel and YouTube. So, let's see what we have today in a very timely way, since we are just experiencing a very heavy typhoon in the center-south of the Philippines. We are discussing about how developers can mitigate against natural disasters. What are the measures that they can take, and what are the ways that they have to build in order really to minimize the impact of natural disasters. We have great speakers today. One developer, architect Ramon, who will tell us how he uses the natural features like the wind, like the water, the shading, and the sunlight to design and develop his constructions. And then we have architect Ramon Abadia, who will tell us what actually developers and constructors can do, how they can build in order to secure the buildings and in order to make sure that everything is safe if earthquakes or typhoons or any other natural elements occur. Now, we know nature can be unpredictable, and the Philippines, as we will hear, is one of the countries in the world where we have the biggest amount of natural occurrences that impact not only the people, but also infrastructure and construction. And another speaker, so the third speaker for today, will be directly from IFC, which is a company of the World Bank that will tell us about a way how everybody, actually, not only developers and constructors, can check if where they're building is actually safe, and if where they're building, what kind of added elements of safety they have to adopt. And he will tell us about the Building Resilience Index. So let's now go on and hear from the first speaker. Angelo Tan is the country lead for the Philippines and acting country lead for Indonesia at the Climate Business Department of the International Finance Corporation, a sister organization of the World Bank and a member of the World Bank Group. In his role, he forges partnership with real estate developers, investors, building professionals, certification providers, academia, and public policymakers across the Philippines towards advancing the adoption of EDGE, which stands for Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies, and BRI, which is the Building Resilience Index. Both integrated platforms, green building and resilience standards, and rating systems designed to make green and resilient buildings much more accessible, affordable, and inclusive for emerging markets and developing economies. Angelo has a decade of real estate experience in mixed-use development management, commercial real estate transactions, and architecture business development. He is an industrial engineer by profession and finished his Master in Sustainable Built Environment at UNSW Sydney under the Australia Awards Scholarship. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Angelo Tan.
So much to the Italian Chamber for inviting us to speak about Building Resilience Index today. So let me just load up my slides and move on with the presentation. So just a brief background about who we are. We are called the International Finance Corporation. We're one of the 5 member organizations of the World Bank Group. So when you say World Bank, it's really IBRD in the Philippines. But when you say the broader World Bank Group, it's really these 5 organizations that you see on the screen. We are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, and that means that we work closely with the private sector to develop solutions in emerging markets. And part of that work is working on business related to climate. So that includes our work on resilience as well. Our work on Building Resilience Index is really part of a broader World Bank Group action plan on climate change, where we are increasing direct adaptation financing to $50 billion over 5 years starting FY21, where we also support countries to mainstream approaches to adaptation. And then, of course, where we are in the process of developing a new rating system to incentivize investments in adaptation and resilience and improve tracking. So you can think of building resilience at its core as a rating system for the resilience of building. And as such, it fits squarely with the 3rd objective of the World Bank Group Action Plan. Now, I think that this is something that we all understand. The Philippines is a hotspot for disasters. We're one of the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change at the global level. And we're also one of the countries with the highest risk from disasters. Whatever type of disaster that is. So it can be types urban flooding, typhoons, landslides, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, and other types of disasters. And so it makes sense for us to pilot Building Resilience Index in the Philippines. And I'm happy to share with you that the Building Resilience Index was actually piloted here. And we're now preparing for a global rollout, which will start with the Caribbean islands and the Pacific islands as well. In fact, just the other day, we launched the Building Resilience Index app, which developers can now use to assess the resilience of their projects. Now, the key message here is that disasters are costly, not just in terms of human lives, but also in terms of our real estate assets. And the challenge is that a lot of our real estate assets are actually uninsured. This is of particular importance to real estate developers, but we also understand that from the side of occupiers, for example, the members of the Italian Chamber, are also concerned about business continuity. So if you cannot ensure business continuity from various hazards, then it will actually lead to additional expense when it comes to repairs, and more importantly, operational disruption, and of course, loss of revenues. Our work in Building Resilience Index is really sort of an expansion of our work in EDGE. So for some of you, EDGE might be a very new concept, but just to give you a brief background about that, EDGE is actually a green building rating system. And we've had a lot of success for this under this program all over the world, where we've so far certified more than 30 million square meters of space, and we are saving more than 550 tons of carbon dioxide on an annual basis. And while we've had a lot of success on the green building side, a lot of our clients were starting to ask, if we're doing something for green buildings, what are we doing for resilient buildings? If we're doing something for climate change mitigation, what are we doing for climate change adaptation? And so it makes sense for us to work also on the adaptation space, because for a lot of businesses in the Philippines, and really for a lot of Filipinos, climate change is here. Climate change is now. And so we have to balance climate change mitigation with climate change adaptation, which is really just as important. And one way of doing this is working through interventions in the way that we design, construct, and also operate our buildings to ensure that they're more resilient to natural hazards. Now, in terms of scaling up our work on resilient buildings, we find that when we work directly with real estate developers, then we can really scale up resilient building design and construction. And later on, I'll talk about how successful we've been in this space. But I also wanted to say that if we really want to significantly move the dial towards a more resilient way of doing real estate development, then we need to work across the real estate ecosystem. So for that reason, we also work directly with financial institutions. So it can be in the form of investment and advisory for banks, for example, that could provide financial products that can support resilient building design and construction. We also can work directly with real estate developers and occupiers, so providing direct investment, for example, for developers, and also providing that advisory to enable them to create more resilient buildings. We're also working on some interventions on the National Building Code. So that includes working at the national level, at the National Construction Code, for example, or even at the local government level, in the sense that we can work with LGUs to create incentives for more resilient building design and construction. And we do have a lot of track record in this space already with our work in the Philippine Green Building Code, which we developed together with the Department of Public Works and Highways. And we can potentially expand on that work. And then finally, we have the rating system, which is Building Resilience Index, and the app that underpins the Building Resilience Index program. So you can think of Building Resilience Index as hazard mapping and resilience assessment framework that allows developers to identify mitigating measures to improve the resilience of their buildings based on the hazards that are present for the project. And it also allows them to generate a resilience rating that can improve disclosure and transparency within the real estate sector in the Philippines. Now, it's important for us to collaborate across various players in the industry, not just in terms of how the Philippines is a very vulnerable country to natural hazards, but in the sense that there's so many co-benefits that we can realize if we work across the ecosystem. So, for example, when we work with governments, then we can potentially lower the cost of disasters. And this is something that a lot of us have realized when COVID started, right? So some of the local governments suffered in terms of reduced revenues, for example. And so when we mitigate against disasters, then hopefully we can do our part to improving the cash flow to our government. Of course, there's also safer and more resilient buildings, so that's very straightforward. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we would like to work with governments, both at the national and local levels, to introduce resilient measures into our construction code. So we also work with financial institutions to lower investor risk and increase accountability in real estate investment decisions by creating or enhancing the transparency in how our financial institutions invest in more resilient buildings. Then we can actually create trust in the sector. Of course, this also means that we work closely with real estate developers. So having a way to disclose the resilience of our buildings can actually offer a differentiation or a competitive edge to these buildings in the market, which is a very important consideration as the economy restarts. We can allow them to have access to best practices for resilient building design and construction. And again, that disclosure mechanism is very important, not just in terms of improving the transparency, but also informing our occupiers and home buyers, for example, which takes me to the last two elements on the screen. So property owners and occupiers can be assured that the real estate project are actually resilient to natural hazards. On the side of office tenants, for example, if you see that a building has a very good resilience rating, then it will inform your decision whether to expand or relocate into that building, for example. So these are just some of the many benefits that we would like to generate. But of course, there are so many others along the line. And ultimately, what we want to say here is that we want to ensure the safety of the people who are occupying the buildings, not just our home buyers for residential developments, but also for our office occupiers as well. So at this point, I'd like to show you a video that can give you a sense or maybe a brief overview of what Building Resilience Index is all about.
With climate change, natural disasters are on the rise. Affecting the safety, habitability, and financial future of our cities and buildings. Rapidly urbanizing areas in developing countries are often the most vulnerable. A proactive, systemic approach to develop resilient buildings can improve the general standard of our built environment. The solution is Building Resilience Index, a hazard mapping, resilience assessment framework, and online platform that evaluates location-specific natural disaster-related risks for a real estate project or portfolio and provides the resilience solutions necessary for improvement. The first index of its kind, Building Resilience Index, provides a common language for various stakeholders, including developers, owners, financial institutions, investors, insurers, and governments. To assess, manage, and disclose the resilience of buildings. Let us be the architects of a more resilient future. We have all the solutions we need today through Building Resilience Index.
So in the last few parts of that video, you might have seen this landscape where many of the buildings have a resilience rating on top of them. And that is ultimately the vision for Building Resilience Index. We hope that in the very near future, all of the buildings in the Philippines will be rated according to Building Resilience Index. Now, you also heard in the video how Building Resilience Index is the first of its kind in the world. And this is the reason for that. Building Resilience Index has three main components. The first one is identification of risk based on the location of the project. And we all know that we have a lot of tools like this. But going beyond that, we actually provide developers a way to manage the risks for their projects by educating them about what mitigating measures to implement. And then, of course, finally, there's the disclosure mechanism, which allows developers to get a resilience rating for their project. Now, let me go through each of these components briefly one by one. So the first component is the identification of risk. And you can see here a map where there's a project, right? So the way that it works is that you just need to put in the address or maybe pinpoint the location of the project, and automatically the tool will tell you what types of hazards are applicable for your project. For this component of the program, we actually engaged with the FIVOLC's DOST to improve the hazard mapping capabilities. And we will continue to improve on that functionality. We are evaluating buildings not just in terms of their physical integrity, but also in terms of their operational continuity. So it goes beyond just design and construction, but also to building operations. We're looking at 4 hazard categories. These are wind, which includes downbursts, tornadoes, and storms, including typhoons. We're also looking at water hazards, so various types of flooding, storm surges, and tsunamis. We're looking at fire hazards, which includes local fires and wildfires. And we also have geoseismic risks, volcanic eruptions, landslides, and earthquakes. So we are looking at all of these 4 hazard types for each project that goes through resilience assessment with Building Resilience Index. So once a developer, for example, identifies what types of hazards are applicable for their project, then they can then proceed to identify what mitigating measures they can implement, for example, as part of new construction or even as retrofit to improve the resilience rating for their building. The Building Resilience Index app is program is underpinned by the Building Resilience Index app. So the app will actually allow the developer to identify what are the most cost-effective mitigating measures to improve the resilience of the building. And as I mentioned earlier, we've just recently launched this app and it's now available at resiliencindex.org, the link to which will also provide you through this webinar and event. You can see here a screenshot of our user guide. So it shows here one of the measures. So for example, the lowest occupied floor and equipment are elevated at 6 meters minimum, which can protect for flooding. So there are many different measures like this. I think we have around 72 for each of the 4 hazard, for all of the 4 hazard categories. And what's very nice about Building Resilience Index is that all of these tools, the user guide and the Building Resilience Index app, are actually available for free. And you can use it and assess your own projects or even the buildings that you are occupying. So this is what the management of risk looks like. So you can see on the left, these are the different hazard categories. And as I mentioned earlier, we have around 72 mitigating measures spread across all of these 4 hazard categories. So the exercise is like this. So you go through an assessment of whether each of these mitigating measures are present on the project. So you just choose yes, no, not applicable, or provide any explanation as well as supporting documents. And then you go through an assessment for geoseismic, wind, water, and fire hazard. And then after that, you go and look at operational continuity measures as well. So once you've done that assessment, the app will actually generate a resilience rating for each of the 4 hazard categories and an overall resilience rating for the project. Which takes me to the third component, which is the disclosure mechanism. Each building that will be assessed for Building Resilience Index will be rated from as low as R to as high as A+. What we want to avoid are R-rated buildings, which are buildings that would likely not survive most applicable hazards. Ultimately, I think that a lot of the buildings in the Philippines will fall under a C or a B rating. And the reason for that is these 2 ratings are the ones that refer to buildings that comply with local building code requirements, whether they are updated or outdated. And again, the vision for this is ultimately if we can move that dial towards an A-rated building, which incorporates global best practices for building design and construction. And then when a building achieves an A rating, then they can achieve an A+ rating if they also have operational continuity measures, such as green building certification, for example, urban heat island mitigation, and some of these other measures that relate more on the operational side of buildings, building life cycle. In terms of the disclosure, the app will actually generate a report that can be used for disclosure. So developers can obtain this report from the app. They can share it with financial institutions, with insurers, with governments, potentially for permitting process, for example. And again, it's very transparent. It's quite comprehensive, and it shows the resilience level of the building and what are the natural hazards that the building mitigates against. And what's very nice is that the developer actually has the capability to publish the results to share them with third parties, including their building consultants, and also have the rating validated or verified by a third party professional. And that's very important, right? Because Building Resilience Index is not a certification system. It's more of a self-disclosure mechanism with some third-party validation. And so the third-party verification is actually a very important component of this whole process. And all of these functionalities can be done from within the Building Resilience Index app. The way that buildings are rated is based on the weakest link principle. You can see a couple of examples on the screen. So if you look at the right, the example on the right, you can see here that the overall rating for the building is an R, despite having a rating of an A, for example, for water. And the reason for that is they have an R rating for fire. What happens in real life is that a building may mitigate against water hazards, for example, but if it uses a lot of combustible materials, then when there is fire, then the building will actually sustain a lot of damage. And what we want to do here is for developers to identify, like the weakest link, what are the significant areas of improvement that would allow them to improve the resilience across all 4 hazard categories to improve the overall resilience rating for the building. Again, ultimately, the vision is for majority of our buildings to reach an A rating. And then if they have operational continuity measures, then they can achieve an A+ rating, which is the highest rating under this assessment. Now I'm going to proceed to another initiative under the Building Resilience Index program, which is the Building Resilience Commitment Campaign, which is really a call to action for businesses and organizations to collaborate to improve the resilience of our buildings and cities. So this is a program that's very similar to a climate pledge, but it's more a resilience pledge. So what we did when we launched this program back in August was that, we started campaigning to developers, financial institutions, and governments to start adopting Building Resilience Index and resilient building design and construction for their projects. So we initially set a target of 1 million square meters. And as of a couple of days ago, when we launched the Building Resilience Index app, we actually achieved 1.83 million square meters of space to be built or retrofitted to become more resilient to natural hazards. So it's seen a lot of success. And at this point, I'd like to just briefly show you a video about Building Resilience Commitment in case you would be interested to join the Resilience Pledge as well.
The Philippines is a hotspot for natural disasters, with significant hazard levels for floods, typhoons, fires, landslides, tsunamis, earthquakes, and volcanoes. With climate change and rapid urbanization, the safety, habitability, and financial future of our cities and the buildings within them is deteriorating. We Filipinos are resilient people. But are our buildings resilient too? We must take immediate action to protect our cities and support those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. It's time to make the pledge to create a more resilient Philippines. The Building Resilience Commitment, an initiative under Building Resilience Index, is a call to action for businesses and organizations to collaborate to improve the resilience of our buildings and cities. Signatories of the Building Resilience Commitment commit to 3 principal areas of action. For developers, to assess the resilience of buildings in a portfolio and develop a roadmap to improve the resilience rating. For investors, to integrate disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and resilience in real estate investment decisions. For policymakers, to formulate policies and develop a roadmap to reward improvements in building resilience above code compliance. Are you ready to make the change? Join us and make the Building Resilience Commitment.
So in terms of the Building Resilience Commitment campaign, as I mentioned earlier, we've actually had a lot of success with this program already. And come 2022, we'll already start mapping out activities for the signatories of the Resilience Pledge to engage with them, to help them to assess their projects. And you can think of them as our priority pool of clients who can use Building Resilience Index. So we'll be doing a lot of one-on-one assistance and also webinars and workshops with the signatories. So as you saw on the video, there are 3 ways by which organizations can actually participate in the Building Resilience Commitment Pledge. And at its core, it's really about integrating Building Resilience Index in the way that we design, in the way that we invest in, and the way that we regulate building design and construction. So if we can incorporate Building Resilience Index and more resilient practices into our frameworks, into our processes, into our designs, then you can join the Resilience Pledge. So do reach out to us so that we can engage with you and allow you to benefit from this program. And there are a lot of benefits, really. So as I mentioned earlier, Building Resilience Index is the first tool of its kind in the world. So you can really pioneer in building resilience. It's a demonstration of your commitment to more resilient building design and construction. And ultimately, what we want to happen is to create a community, a dynamic community of resilience advocates in the Philippine real estate sector that can help enhance industry trust for your brand, for your company, for what you offer to the market. So that will be the end of the presentation. At this point, I'd just like to acknowledge our donors, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, who provided the seed funding for us to start on the Building Resilience Index program, and also to the Australian government, who continues to provide the funding so that we can make the pilot in the Philippines a huge success. I also would like to acknowledge ARISE, the Private Sector Alliance for Disaster Resilient Societies, who's our official partner in scaling up Building Resilience Index in the Philippines. And also, of course, thank you to the technical panel of experts and our signatories to the Building Resilience Commitment, including Italpinas Development Corporation, which was actually one of the pioneers to sign up for the Resilience Pledge. So I'm going to end the presentation there, and we're looking forward to engaging with you towards a more resilient real estate industry in the Philippines. Thank you.
So our speaker, architect Ramon, is the chairman and CEO of Italpinas Development Corporation, a developer who has since ever been focusing on green architecture and to develop in secondary cities in the Philippines. That means in the provinces. Architect Nati is a fierce advocate of sustainability, especially in construction, but also for a sustainable lifestyle. So let me give the floor to architect Romolo Nati.
I would like to first of all thank the organizer for inviting me to share with the audience my experience and our experience in Italpinas Development Corporation. We are a real estate developer focuses on designing and building green buildings in emerging cities in the Philippines. Allow me to share the screen. Here we are. Just a quick introduction of Italpinas Development Corporation. We are a member of the Philippine Green Building Council and US Green Building Council, and our buildings are rated green by EDGE, which is the green rating system developed by the World Bank through IFC. We have been able to secure a lot of awards for our innovation in real estate. We also have been featured in several national and international magazines, like this one in 2014, my partner and I, Giorgio Leviste. Quick introduction about myself. I am an architect by education, and I am a business person, a business entrepreneur, working in the Philippines for quite several years now. and my partner is a lawyer who study both in the US, in the Philippines, or actually also in Australia. The unique value proposition of IDC are mainly three. We are totally committed to deliver passive green building using passive green design strategies in emerging cities for the rising middle class in the country. Now, the session today is focuses on resiliency of buildings, so how buildings can mitigate and react to major natural calamities, or mainly we can divide these elements by four big areas. One is wind, the other one is water, one is geo, and the last one is fire. Today I may touch a little more on the wind, which is one of the elements that we focus the most. But before going there, let me just explain the way we design and how we are able to mitigate again damages that can be created by major natural calamities. What we do, we gather data about the place, the location where the structure is going to be built. When we say data, we talk about even historical data, if there were earthquakes or flood, or if the area is prone to floods. And obviously also about wind speed, wind direction, and also temperature during the entire year. Now we integrate this data through using parametric software, so we can come up with a 3D model which represent the best solution given our requirements. Now, these are some slides that can better show how we gather this data. Mainly, we have data gathering done accessing data coming from mainly satellites. And in this video, we can see some of the software in action. I mean, the software that we use. For example, one way to mitigate the effect that the sun can have on inside the indoor spaces, because we know when the sun hits the facade, we have an in-house greenhouse effect. We use that software in order to optimize the location of the buildings. In this case, instead, we study the behavior of buildings during the design stage to increase natural ventilation when the speed of the wind is not so high, but also to mitigate damages in case of typhoon and so strong wind, which is, by the way, in the Philippines, it's happened quite often. Last video shows how we analyze the temperature inside the buildings so that we can design and compute the louvers or cantilever structure or ledges that are needed to mitigate this effect. Now, this is in terms of wind mainly. Now, in terms of water, as I said, let me just go back. In terms of water, mainly about floods, it's very important to analyze the history of the location to see if there were previous flooding. And obviously, it's much better to choose locations that are flood-free. Elevation is one of the best way to avoid this problem. I mean, be elevated from the sea level, let's say. In terms of fire, the most important thing is to religiously follow the requirement given by the National Building Code in the Philippines, in this case, and comply with also all the requirements that apply to the building that we are designing, given by the BFP, which is the Bureau of Fire in the Philippines. Now, I will skip some other slides to go straight to show some of the projects that we have done and for which during the design stage we apply the strategies that I just mentioned. We have our first project, Primavera Residences, which is located in Cagayan de Oro, which is considered the hub of northern Mindanao. And we are located in a plateau in Cagayan, so we are elevated. I mean, the property where the building is located is elevated around 110 meters from the sea level. Cagayan is an example of, experienced in the past several floods. So one of the way to mitigate, as I said earlier, flooding is to choose the right location. In fact, we are elevated from the sea level so that we don't have a flood problem. Obviously, also the presence of a well-designed, planned and built drainage system and other infrastructure help to mitigate all the damages that can come from calamities, natural calamities. This is the building. You can see also the facade is shaded to reduce the sun direct illumination on the windows. And in case of ventilation here, you can see that we increase natural ventilation, creating an inner courtyard inside the building that enhance the natural ventilation so that we can have better, more pleasant indoor temperature. And as a matter of fact, creating all this void in the structure of the building also helps build the building to withstand typhoon, because we do not create a barrier for the wind to enter and exit. That's also an easy and nice and effective strategy that can be used in designing and constructing building. We also have photovoltaic panels on the rooftop for renewable energy production. And this is the third floor where the air gets inside in the building, and then it goes up through this inner courtyard that works as a natural chimney. An ongoing project still in Cagayan de Oro, still same location, is called Primavera City. It's a much bigger project that also display the same features that I just show in Primavera Residences. And there is a video that can better explain how the building has been conceptualized, always taking in mind the mitigation of what we have talked about. The last project I present today is Miramonti, Green Residences in Santo Tomas, Batangas. Also, this project has been designed and conceptualized taking in mind mitigation measures that, again, can help designers and developers to build and to deliver to the market a much more well-performing projects. And this is a video. Okay, let me go back. So as you saw in the videos, I mean, there are many ways to for design and developers to deal with potential problems that are created by I mean, natural calamity. So I hope you enjoy the presentation, and please do not hesitate to contact me by email or Facebook or Twitter. Thank you very much.
Our other speaker, architect Ramon Abadia. He not only is a director of the Infrastructure and Construction Focus Group, but also he has been the executive director of SIAP, the Construction Industry Authority of the Philippines. Further, he is also involved with United Architects of the Philippines, as he is the chair for Resiliency and Innovation. Absolutely one of the top architects in the Philippines, he will tell us from his own experience what developers, constructors, and designers need to do to safeguard construction and infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, architect Ramon Abadia.
Welcome to the Design and Build report of the Infrastructure Construction Focus Group. My name is Architect Ramon Abadia. The first thing to ask is resilient to what? What are we going to be resilient about? In the Philippines, we have a state of risk. We have floods, storms, earthquakes that are recurring hazards 22 times a year, the storms. We have geography, our location, is prevalent to earthquakes, tsunami, and landslides. We have frequency and intensity that is continuously increasing because of climate change. The Philippines is ranked third most disaster risk among the countries, and many of our people reside in disaster-prone areas. The cost of disasters have also increased. To start, we know we can't prevent hazards from happening, but we can mitigate the impact and try to make our communities more resilient. The National Climate Change Action Plan focused on many things. One of them is food security, which obviously is very important to all of us. We have also water efficiency. We have the ecosystem and environmental stability. We have human security, climate smart industry and services, sustainable energy, and the other one is knowledge and capacity development. This particularly falls under the knowledge and capacity development to improve our resiliency. The purpose of knowledge and capacity development is to have more awareness on various tools that are available, strategies on risk reduction, build back better solutions, and the most important one, which is in number 4, we should have been in number 1, is the change of attitude. Let me say that resiliency, sustainability, and green are all like brothers and sisters. As an example, if you have a building that did not survive a particular disaster, then you can say that the building is not only not resilient, but also not green, because you have to replace everything again all over again. And I think this is how resiliency, sustainability, and green are actually like brothers and sisters. What are the impacts to resiliency? There are various factors that impact resiliency. An example, in real life, you have a building that is built well. Unfortunately, another building higher than it collapses on it. Then it becomes damaged and destroyed. This is the same case when this is what happened in New York when the World Trade Center was attacked. I was in one of the hotels, a small hotel just in the outside of the World Trade Center, and that building was also damaged because of the collapse of another building. So sometimes, even if we think and design the building fairly resilient, there are times that nature and in this particular case, terrorist activities had actually played a role in destroying buildings around the World Trade Center. So in general, out of the natural disasters that we have, if you can see, the one that is focused here is actually the Philippines. The Philippines, unfortunately, is located smack in the center of all of these bad climate that's happening around this area. And our real estate being here increases our risk to all of these disasters. What are the factors that may affect a structure or for the failure of structures? Number one, of course, is improper design. uh, although structures are being handled by professionals, but there are subsequent work other than design. The other one is construction. Sometimes poor workmanship. Sometimes somebody cheated because of corruption and replace bigger bars with smaller bars. So improper design, along with the other variables that happen in the construction site, can affect the structures. Also, the use of poor and substandard materials. One of them would be often, as you go further away from Manila, the standards of material are also going down a bit. And this is very unfortunate, particularly during disasters like the ones that happened in, say, in Samar and Leyte, where the available materials that being sold there initially were substandard materials. So if you use these substandard materials to bring back your structure, it might be that the next cycle of destructive, say, typhoon might again affect the same structure. And the other one is poor workmanship. Sometimes, especially when there are some corruption involved in construction, they hire lesser skilled people with maybe very little knowledge of what they are doing. They're just told, do this and do that. And in this case, sometimes a different trade, like a carpenter doing plastering work, might result in poor workmanship because the skill set is not there. So the other one is improper construction, wherein say the wrong materials or the wrong position of these materials are being located. This can also cause failures in structures. There are some examples which I will show later. The other one is the lack of maintenance. You have created a building, but you don't maintain it properly. If you notice all the iconic buildings around the world, like the Empire State Building, you have the San Francisco Bridge, and other iconic buildings, they have been there for a long, long time. However, the reason why they are still here and still looks very well is because they have a very strong maintenance program that continuously monitor, replace, maintain the structure, especially like for example, the San Francisco Bridge. This is a suspended bridge, and there are strands of steel that are carrying the entire weight. But because of its long time construction, there are some strands that need to be identified, replaced, and because they do this continuously, they are able to maintain the strength and the looks of the entire iconic bridge. The other one is the one that I was talking about a while ago, that another failure of structures can be the cause of an impact from an adjacent structure. This is very important because I remember when we were in, I think, Malaysia, there was a building being built, a high building being built beside the Philippine Embassy. And so I told the ambassador that because there's a building being built on its side, that will be increasing the risk of this building because it's only a relatively like a bungalow embassy. So that will be any impact coming from that adjacent failure or foreign objects that are flying might cause failure of the structure down below in case of our Malaysian embassy. So the next one is these are some of the examples of improper construction or wrong placement of rebars, and also understanding the nature of winds as they enter the building. The tendency is to be able to blow up the building from within. That's why we need to reinforce, like the drawing on your lower left side, from post-evaluations, particularly in the States, based on Hurricane Katrina, they found out that putting double nails on the edges and on the rims and also on the ridges, they were found that after the event, they were able to survive. And when they look at them, those areas that survive happen to have two nails together. So these are one of the things that can be adapted by evaluating very well what happened to previous disasters. In the Philippines before, we do not have much data. It's only in the States that they have very good data of post-evacuations that they share. They share to other people for other people to understand what happens after the event. In the Philippines, by this time, we have a lot of documentation, particularly when we were hit by the typhoon in Haiyan, the typhoon in summer and Leyte. We've learned a lot from that, and personally, I've actually participated in the post-evaluation of about 41 LGUs and participated in providing technical assistance to LGUs who do not have capacity or have very low capacity technically. So here again, you can see on the right side, one of the things that happened during, for example, a violent typhoon, there are not only the typhoon wind, but also the debris that are floating around because of the winds. And these are also very dangerous because as they fly, they enter and strike our windows, they enter and strike other things and people walking. And because of this, we need to also protect our windows and doors from this debris, particularly if you live, for example, near areas that are susceptible to massive debris coming out, like those that you can find in lightly constructed communities. So we have to protect them. Also, in terms of design, we need to follow the earthquake design recommendations that are found in many technical structural books that show you how to not design buildings, especially those that are within the areas that are susceptible to earthquake. So the biggest one is like, for example, it's common to find shutters, aluminum shutters along storefronts and along fire department, fire stations and other big areas that have roll up shutters. Unfortunately, these kinds of shutters do not perform well in high wind. So there need to be some adjustment, especially on the way it is attached. Needs to comply with certain tweaks so that it can be able to resist more wind loads. The other one is we have to put bracings. This is one of the things that have come up because of this Haiyan, and we need to put bracing, especially on the roofing, as they are really impacted by great winds. And most importantly, we have to follow the building code. The building code, we need to follow them because the building codes are being designed, are being made more stringent every time there is a prevailing disaster. It is being able to tweak so that disasters can be reduced. Okay, strategies. Some of the strategies that needs to be taken, well, number one is updating existing laws, IRRs, and policies. We need to, the government need to improve existing laws and IRRs and policies to address and strengthen whatever is weak, so that our structures will be built with a higher standard. The other one is multi-hazard risk assessment of projects. Sometimes people are, special designers, they do not include all the risks that are really there. They are aware of these earthquakes, but sometimes it's the liquefaction that is there. Sometimes it is the landslide that is there. Sometimes there's a fire risk, like if they were near forest, especially in the States, where housing are also being affected by massive fire, a forest fire. And then also we need to have risk mitigations in the plans and details. You see, things can be engineered at this point in time. If you determine there is a weakness, there is a engineered solution to address this particular weakness in, say, in the site or of the project. So this one should be included in the plans and details. And as you practice, you are able to have your own solutions, and you can see that they work. The most important part is to be able to document the solutions and be able to share the information with your peers so that people will be able to understand the types of solutions that may be also applicable for their projects. The other one is you can also use testing, modeling, and mock-ups. For big projects, this is not a problem because they have sometimes budgets for testing, modelings, and sometimes for mock-up. However, for smaller projects, this may not be or not being done because they cost also. But it is good that especially for large projects, especially those projects that have a lot of people inside, should probably need to have testing, modelings, and mock-up. The next one is tools. For tools, there are tools available from government. These are like risk charts and thematic maps. They show you in particular areas where, say, landslides are prone, maybe liquefactions are present, or maybe other risk. So there are risk maps and charts that are available from government. Also, we need to also try and understand post-disaster assessments, wherein and the documentation, we need to look at how the disasters can be prevented by understanding how the destroyed buildings actually got destroyed, by understanding their weaknesses and what they did not do and what they have done that are good. So it's important also to study post-disaster reports coming from other countries that have similar situations to us. Of course, that's the next one, which is the international post-disaster. We need to look at what the others are also doing so that we don't try and invent the wheel all over again. Also, it will help if you can conduct your own specific study and awareness of the risks and dangers that are there. And most important is sometimes, like what happens, for example, in UAP, we have these peer group discussions that talk about, for example, how to design and have more resilient buildings and sustainable buildings and green buildings. These are very good in knowledge sharing, and the United Architects of the Philippines is very strong in this aspect. So the most important, in my opinion, of all of these things is to have a resilient mindset. It is to change our attitude. We need to culturalize resiliency as a nation. The Japanese people, for example, I can say that have a culturalized resiliency. That is why even if they are affected, in fact, they are affected by major earthquakes every day. They have maybe 1,000 earthquakes a day, mild ones, but they are visited more commonly by natural disasters because we, like Japan, belong to the what you call this, the ring of fire in our area here in the Pacific. So we need to be able to culturalize resiliency. In the Philippines, for example, we have moments that we are actually very resilient, but we need to do it like a military thing. Everybody is aware of what to do, where to go, how to help. Paminsan yun ang problema natin, yung how to help. It seems that when there are disasters, the family goes out from the disaster area and often relies on government and other institutional help to recover and conduct recovery works in their area. Unlike in Japan, they send off their family, their wife and children, but the guys, the men, they stay behind to help. So that's the big difference. Because they're also willing to help. They don't just want to be helped, but they are willing to help themselves. So we need this one definitely to culturalize resiliency. The other thing is we need not reinvent the wheel over and over again, meaning we need to learn from lessons learned, understand how they are, and apply this. If ever we build upon it, not reinvent it again. This is not helpful to disasters. The other one is we need to do a lot of research and development ourselves or in our offices in order for us to strategize, find ways to be able to put this in our designs, and eventually they being built will be now in the building itself. We need also to become experts in resiliency. Experts, meaning we have to attempt in our own small way, our attempt to become experts, meaning we have to learn, we have to read, and we have to be aware of what are the things that are needed to become an expert in resiliency. We use also the concepts and the use of proper standards. This is important. And most importantly, we have to pay special attention to design details. It is the design details that often are the ones that are either wrongly executed on the site, wrongly designed, wrongly detailed, and often they are the very reasons why the buildings collapse sometimes. We also need to implement the construction. Sometimes, I'm not saying, sometimes those that actually monitor construction activities are sometimes just new. They are not yet aware of what is wrong with what they are looking at, because they can be on top of a wrong thing, but they don't have no awareness of it. So we have to properly monitor the implementation by using people that are actually knowledgeable to spot details, to spot the mistakes. So there is a cycle that sometimes there is a strong typhoon now, which happens maybe every 50 years. In case of the Yolanda, it was supposed to be a long cyclic event that happens na medyo matagal, ano? But no matter how far away are the impacts, there is always a risk involved. So this is a table of probabilistic risk that shows you that even if it is the return period is only 10,000 years, there is still an amount of risk, no matter they are small. These are only calculations that the experts made, but there is always a risk. So when there is always a risk, we have always to be prepared. We have to be extra careful. We have to understand that many of these risks will not just go away. Sometimes you are at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it happens. So we have to be aware that we have to always create reduce this risk. The other one is that many people are not aware or do not subscribe to global warming. Oh, here is a very good example. Here is a very good example that you can see that there is really global climate change, meaning before they had longer panties, but now they need a low because the weather is hotter. I'm just joking. Anyway, thank you, and let us all continue to build better, resilient communities. Maraming salamat, and good day, gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the end of today's first episode of Design and Build series by Infrastructure and Construction Focus Group. I would like to thank you all for following us. Please subscribe to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. We will be happy to welcome you back at our next episode. So please stay in touch and be safe.